Hi everyone, welcome to In the Spotlight by GigFinesse, the series you come to find out all about the entertainment industry. I'm Bianca, and I'm so excited to introduce my guest, Mr. Tor Miller.
Thanks for having me.
So you are an artist from New York. You play the piano, the guitar, you're a singer. You've toured all over the US and Canada and also in other parts of the world. You've opened for a lot of people. You've written with Grammy-nominated artists, and you have over 53,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, which is incredible. I've been super excited to talk to you. How did you get into music originally?
Yeah, I mean, I always enjoyed music as a kid, without really knowing or understanding why. My parents were really adamant that I take music lessons. They recognized that I had a passion for it. And so I started with piano lessons when I lived in Manhattan and Brooklyn as a kid. I took it semi-seriously, and then moved to New Jersey with my parents, and I met a new teacher that my parents set me up with. And we just hit it off, and like it kind of met me at a perfect point where I had moved to a new place that was so vastly different than where I had come from at a very sort of difficult age in terms of socializing and making new friends and whatnot. So I had a lot of time on my hands. I had a new teacher who was basically like my only like real friend, you know, for a bit. And so I just became obsessed with those lessons, and he would have me learn. You know, he kind of changed the format of what the lessons were. Like when I was a child, they were very, very strict and classical, and that didn't really stick with me.
Yeah.
But Anthony, my teacher, who I met in New Jersey, he was much more unconventional, and he just asked what songs I wanted to learn to play, which no one had ever done. And so I think we started by learning like Clocks by Coldplay or something. And then the next week, I was singing along to a song that I wanted him to teach me. And he's like, oh, you have a nice voice. We should learn how to sing and play it. And then so I learned whatever song it was, and I sang and played it. And then he was like, you should write a song. I'll teach you how to write I'll teach you a basic song structure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just never looked back. And I just kept writing and writing and writing. And I started a band in high school. And then I went to NYU, Clive Davis, and then got signed when I was 19 to Glassnote. And then just, never looked back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you picked up the guitar in the last years. Did you start learning on the piano? Is that how you initially got into music?
Yeah, I mean, I was basically exclusively playing piano until about 2019, 2020. When COVID hit, it was like, this is my opportunity to really put some hours in on the guitar. So, it was just piano and then guitar, more recently.
So, I mean, you've been playing music for many years, since you were a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think your brand has really changed over the years and evolved with time?
Well, I think like the best way to sort of describe it is I feel like I've grown into myself a bit more. I think that in terms of branding, like, I mean, I don't think that I've really considered branding really until the last couple of years. You know, I was just making music and just going for it and not really thinking twice about it, which was fun because you don't get caught up in, you know, things that don't really matter. But at the same time, it makes it difficult for people to understand who you are. And I think that the biggest difference now, I've just recorded a new album, and I'd say it's probably the most cohesive thing I've ever done. And I think it's more obvious like what it is. I'd say my earlier records are extremely eclectic, which I love because I love a lot of different types of music. But I think in a sense it can confuse people because they're like, who is this? We need sort of like an anchor.
Yeah,
you know,
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
But I think it's great that you're not like, oh, this has to be like my niche and I have to stick with this, because it's just you being authentically yourself. And I think you connect with people better in that way than if you'd be like, oh, I have to create like this type of music.
This is like, I do bluegrass or something, and like every record is bluegrass, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like that, not to knock, that's amazing and it's a great tradition, you know? But David Bowie was one of my biggest artists, like most inspired artists for myself, and or I should say, he's like the most inspirational to me. And he was always changing from record to record, changing his entire identity and look and brand and sound. And I can't say I take it to the lengths that he did, and that's not really my ambition. But I always like the change up, and I think that just keeps an artist really fresh.
Yeah. How would you describe your brand right now?
I would say it's basically like no bullshit, like well-written songs. Like I'm a writer, and that's really what I am. And so I think that my brand is really just like writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate music so much, but I don't think I have the talent to do that. So I'm really curious, how do you go about songwriting? Like, what is your approach to it?
It changes constantly, and I've been fortunate enough to work with so many different writers and artists who all have their own sort of idiosyncrasies.
Yeah.
And I've picked up a lot of tricks from people. I can't say that it's ever the same, but probably the most common thing for me is, or sort of the best outcome and result has been when I have a strong concept in mind for what I want to write about, like a very specific story. A title probably as well comes with that. And then from that point, like I'll sit down at the piano or the guitar, try to figure out the chords, and then I start singing when I land on things that I like, and kind of let the melody dictate the next chords, and I'm kind of doing it all at once. Then retroactively like fitting lyrics into whatever melodic space I've created. And then I work chronologically. So whatever, I'm not usually, some people like write the chorus first or something. It's almost always the verse, like for me.
Yeah, that's really cool. So where do you get most of your inspiration from? Is there like a specific maybe person or event or theme that you draw from?
I mean, it's just different life experiences. It's always, I just write about what I know, which is my life and the lives of the people around me. And yeah, it's different events that occur that will inspire a song, and a project. But it's always just been a way for me to kind of understand my own existence and navigate my way through a kind of crazy life. And so that's why I write so personally, just so I can kind of evac all the emotions. Yeah.
Have you ever been nervous to put out a song or something? Because if you write about things that are very personal to you and then you put them out into the world for everyone, I can imagine it's pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I mean, the songs can have real life consequences, and I've faced those, and it's not fun, and it's not fun to feel like I'm really excited about this song, but I'm really anxious about it at the same time, because I know someone is going to construe it in some sort of way. And the thing is, like, what I try to tell people is that, yes, like, I can be inspired to write about one specific person and thing.
Yeah.
But invariably what always happens is that you kind of, like, create a mesh of a bunch of different people and a bunch of different instances from your life. Like, it's very rare that it's like I have one song that's like, it's just about this one person, and it's like, it's no doubt, that. It always has a little bit of like, from different relationships, that you kind of create this like, Frankenstein sort of person that you're addressing. And so it's not always fair to look at a song and be like, I can't believe you did this, this is whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, it's not really like fully about you. And often like it can be, I'm addressing myself, but like through this,
I think it's also such a beautiful way to like deal with your emotions and deal with everything that's happening and just have that outlet, because a lot of people don't really have that outlet.
It's interesting. Like, I had this thought when I was on the plane yesterday, which was someone had mentioned therapy or going to therapy. And I've had very sporadic and short spurts in therapy. But then I kind of realized, I was like, well, basically like every songwriting session I've ever been in is a therapy session. And oftentimes, like when you're doing a string of a lot of sessions, like it's always strangers. So it's like you can kind of reenact a therapy session. And it's genuine because like you have to get down to something real to write something impactful. So you end up having all these like very intense conversations with people you've just met who are completely dislocated from your life at that point in time, that it's very easy to kind of go through all these things. And so I realized like basically every single day for like 8 years I've been going to therapy. So I think I'm very fortunate for that and super lucky. And like if you can acknowledge that that is part of what you're doing, then you know there's a lot of good that can come from it.
No, that's really cool. Do you ever face writer's block, and how do you deal with writer's block? I
mean, I would say the entirety of COVID was basically writer's block for me. Really? I mean, I was working on Generation of Me with Adrian, but Adrian Simon, who produced it, and we were like making that album, but all those songs were they were written already, and we would do a little editing, but I had Adrian there to help me too.
Yeah.
But that stretch of time, like after that record, I felt so lost. I felt like I had kind of lost some sort of edge as well, and I just wasn't feeling connected to anything I was making. And obviously there was this crazy pandemic happening and life completely upended and all these external forces that were making it difficult. But I was pretty hard on myself during that period, like really feeling like wanting to give up. Maybe I didn't love music, you know, really like questioning things in a way that I had never done before.
What made you keep going when you were questioning it?
You know, it's just, I mean, I realized that I was just miserable in general. And it wasn't music. It was so many other things in my life that I hadn't addressed that were blocking me, you know, from being creative, having ideas, thinking outside of this little sort of box. And I don't know, when it really comes down to it, it's like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And I've dedicated so much time and effort to it and really neglected so many other areas of my life that if it doesn't work out, like I'm such a hot mess. So it's like, it's this or bust, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to ride it the whole way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're doing great.
Thanks.
So
Thanks.
It's obviously working out really well for you.
But I mean, I think it's so easy, and I think it's important for people to talk about, but like, that's very nice of you to say, but it doesn't always feel that way.
Yeah.
And you always want more, and you're always comparing yourself to people, even if you pretend like you don't. And I'll say, like, after COVID, I rebuilt my confidence, and like, I feel great.
I feel like it's very big of you to say, like you were talking about, like every day is like a therapy session in a way. Like it shows, like you're very emotionally mature, and like I feel like you have to be as well to a certain extent to write good music and to really dig deep for those lyrics.
This is like what you're having to get in touch with every day. Like on a good day, like you really do. But yeah, you have to understand your emotions. Like I think that this is like a comparison. It's like musicians can be kind of like philosophers in a way, right? Like I don't think that they're nearly as smart often, but so I don't want anyone to misconstrue what I'm saying. But it's like you're trying to understand life, right?
I mean, it's a different
and help other people understand.
It's a different intelligence.
Yeah, it's a different philosophy. You
know?
But yeah, you're trying to understand life and why we're doing any of this and making people's life just a little bit more enjoyable for 3 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. Looking back at your career until now, what's one piece of advice you would give to an artist trying to make it in the industry?
Actually, I'm going to co-op some advice that I overheard recently from Eric Romero, who's a producer who worked on this new album with me, where he was talking about if there's anyone in the music industry who tells you that something has to be this way, it's not true. You know, and it's like just figure out whatever works for you. And like don't go against your instincts because you think someone has like all these years of experience. Because like what I learned going through the whole album, the whole label circuit and world and all of that is that nobody knows what's going to happen. No one can predict anything. And everyone is just guessing. It's like certain levels of educated guess, but it's a guess.
Yeah.
And so you should just do what you think is dope and like not worry about it.
You've played a lot of ticketed and non-ticketed shows as well.
Yeah.
How would you describe your experience with the two of them? What's the biggest difference for a musician, for an artist?
Well, I mean, attentiveness, for sure. You know, I think that, you know, a ticketed show, they're coming to watch you perform. And then a non-ticketed show, it's you're creating the ambiance for the room. They're not necessarily there for you, but you're assisting in their night. So it's much different roles. But yeah, that's the biggest difference for sure. And I mean, the amount of time you play. You know, a ticketed show is always shorter, and a non-ticketed could be 3 hours long, 4 hours long.
Yeah. Has it ever been difficult playing like a non-ticketed show and you're like, oh, like that changing your mental approach almost to it and knowing that you're there but they're not there for you? For
sure. I'd say for myself, like early on when I jumped back into doing some non-ticketed shows, it felt like, I'm just being honest, but like a little bit it's bruised my ego in a bit of a way, but it ended up being like the best thing. Because once I got past that, which was just nonsense anyway, I was like, this is such a great opportunity, one, for me to practice. Like, so I can play 3 hours and like I can utilize this time, optimize this time, you know, if I can only just shift my perspective.
Yeah.
And so once that clicked for me, I was like, oh, this is great. It's a paid rehearsal. You know, like that's incredible.
That's a really good way to approach it. How old were you when you started to do non-ticketed shows?
Well, before I had joined the sort of GigFinesse world, I was doing it as a teenager. And I would play like one a week in on the Jersey Shore. From when I was like 15 to when I went to college. So I was always accustomed to doing it. I'd always done them. It was a great way to make money. It really like helps you survive in the short term. Yeah. So
how would you say your career kind of changed once you joined GigFinesse, and at what point in your career did you join GigFinesse? Yeah, so I met Mir way back, like I guess 2018, maybe 19. And he had reached out to me because he had gone to NYU and had been sort of like speaking to a lot of the Clive Davis people, and my name came up quite a bit. So we had a meeting, and I was making Generation of Me, or I was just about to start making Generation of Me. I was leaving Glassnote at the time, the label I was on. So I was sort of facing this new independence. So it worked out really well, and Mir had asked me, like, what's a goal of yours in the next year? And I had said to sell out Bowery Ballroom. And then we did it in like 6 months. So it was really, really cool. It was something I felt like, you know, it was a tough time to be leaving the label. There was a lot of uncertainty. So it was nice to feel like, oh, it kind of opened my eyes to like, there's this whole other world of the music industry. And there's like an alternate path that you can take to the same end result, where you don't have to be going necessarily through the label system, through traditional agents, and there's still a way to progress. So that like equipped me with like quite a bit of perspective that I didn't have previously, and I realized that I had a lot more sort of autonomy over my career than I previously had realized. So it was great. It was like, it just shifted my perspective. And I realized like, oh, I can keep doing this even if I'm not in the label world. And honestly, I don't really want it to be. So yeah, it's nice. So what do you think is like the biggest benefit for an artist working with GigFinesse? Would you say it's the autonomy of the absolutely. Career? You know, I think that you can really be in control of what gigs you want to take, what you don't want to, how often you want to be gigging. You know, I think it just affords you a lot of freedom. And
that's really nice. And like whenever, I mean, for myself, like whenever I need a non-ticketed gig and I want to play and make a little money, it's very easy to just jump in somewhere. Like, so it's always nice to know that there'll be an option. There's always a show that you can have. And yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. So how do you get ready for a show, for a non-ticketed show and for a ticketed show?
For a ticketed show, just like make sure that I'm rehearsed and know all my parts, like really like not lie to myself and really like actually practice. So I'll do that in like the week leading up to the show, depending like if you're on tour, it's a different thing. If they're just standalone shows, I'll practice, get my band together, do a couple. I like to do 3 rehearsals, and then sound check, load in around like 5, 6, then all that dead time in between, and then right before we're gonna go on, I usually like to be in the green room, and then I take 5 minutes or something where I'm just not on my phone and I'm not really talking to anyone and kind of in my own way like meditating a little bit and doing some kind of breath work that I discovered that works for me. And then just really trying to like be present. So the show goes off without a hitch, because I've had experiences where, maybe at a hometown show or something, there's a lot of friends there, so you go out in the crowd, you talk to people, and then you realize like, oh, I have to go on stage like in a couple minutes, and then you walk up on stage, you're not really like mentally prepped, and those shows I think always suffered as a result. And like you're not as present, so you're like, oh, is this sounding good? Is this working? Is the crowd liking this? You're way more in your head. I found that if I don't do the kind of meditation, that's always the case. Yeah.
Do you ever get nervous before a show? Does the meditation kind of help you calm your nerves, or is it more just to get into the right headspace of like
it's
being
more
present?
To get into the right headspace, and it's honestly more to kind of connect with the nervous energy, because I feel like, I've been gigging professionally since I was 14. It's like on piano. It's like I don't really feel nervous ever anymore. And I just felt like that's kind of a shame. And that's a big reason as to why like I started playing guitar live at shows, which I like wasn't at all prepared to do live in front of people. But I was like, I kind of want to feel scared again. I want to be frightened to walk on stage. I want to feel the same energy I felt when I was 14, 15,
Do you think the nerves help you when you perform?
Absolutely. I mean, if you need to control them, right? And that's kind of where the meditate. It's so funny because anyone who knows me will feel like, what are you talking about meditating for? Like, you don't do any of that. But I think that, you have to control it. If you get way too nervous, then you're thinking of everything but the music.
Yeah.
But if you kind of use that, it could be like a bit of a superpower, I think. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. What's the biggest show the biggest ticketed show
that I've played?
Yeah.
I played Hammerstein Ballroom with James Bay. That was like 3,000, 3,200. I played Brooklyn Steel with Maggie Rogers. That was like 2,600 maybe. And then I played Queen Elizabeth Hall in London with Mark Lanigan. He was in the band Screaming Trees. And that was about like 3,000 as well. That's probably my biggest. I've played festivals too, but that was definitely my biggest, those were my biggest crowds.
Yeah, that's very impressive. Back to the original question before, the prep question. How do you prep for a non-ticketed show?
That is sort of in the same way that week, I'll kind of get together a few covers I want to do and just practice them a little bit. But in all honesty, like I do have my phone, which I keep in front of me with like the chords and lyrics to every song I'm going to cover.
Yeah.
And so I feel pretty comfortable just kind of rocking them on the fly. So it's not quite as intense a like pre-ritual. Kind of just show up and play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember what I wanted to ask you
Okay.
before
Oh,
as well.
nice callback.
Yeah, exactly. You were talking about comparing yourself to other people and your career. And as a musician, your career is very different from like a traditional corporate job, where I think there's a certain type of success that people chase when they go into like a corporate job, maybe a promotion, a raise, things like that. It's very outlined. As an artist, you have a lot of different things that you can like go after and different goals. So how do you define success for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that has changed over time, or my answer to that has changed over time. I think that for myself, if I'm just always getting better every time I do something, then it's successful. And if it's music that I don't hate that I'm making, and I can stand to listen to it 5 years later and not feel cringe about it, then that's very successful. On the other end, like financially, if I'm not like having to worry, then I'm very successful in music because it's very hard. But yeah, I don't know. I just think like fundamentally you have to like the music you make. And that's not easy because oftentimes you're your biggest critic. And if you can do that, then that's super successful.
How do you kind of balance your job and your personal life and still find time for yourself and not overwork yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of naturally have a good balance with it. I work a lot. I do a lot of sessions, but they're really fun, you know, and you're hanging out with your friends often. And so it feels like it's two birds, one stone kind of situation. So it's like, I'm working really hard and we're making stuff, but it's all my buddies. So it's like, and then with Sophia, I mean, we're with each other all the time. And she understands the traveling lifestyle and all. And so it's very comfortable. It's good.
So we talked about you playing different types of shows, including ticketed, non-ticketed, and you are approached by different venues as well to come play at their venue. What is a benefit for an artist of your caliber when working with GigFinesse?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you get approached by a lot of people, you don't know who they are, you don't know what the business is, you don't know if it's reputable or not. And so I think that there's a bit of insurance when, there's a trusted partner in GigFinesse. I know that I'm going to get paid in a couple days, directly to my bank account, all those things. Like I can rely on that regardless of the situation. So I think that's really nice. There's I think the ability to grow with GigFinesse too, as I even pursue different residencies and whatnot that I can be doing. Have it a bit neater with GigFinesse, the possibility of GigFinesse having more venues in Los Angeles and different places, and then that just opens up my network even more and consistency. And if I'm looking for money in the short term, I know that there's all these GigFinesse approved venues that I can just slide right into and keep it going. So I think for me, it's a little bit of security and knowing the people I'm dealing with, because you hear about horror stories all the time. And I think at the same time, it's you can still be the master of your own, or I don't want to say that. You can still be the controller of your own destiny, And so that I appreciate. I just like everyone on the team. I like how seamless the platform is, and just knowing that I'm always going to get paid is nice.
Yeah, that is a really good benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like there's a lot of horror stories about artists not being paid or having really bad experiences.
Weeks and months, and or run-ins with sort of nasty individuals.
So talking about non-ticketed shows and preparing for non-ticketed shows, how do you curate your set list and choose between songs that you've written yourself and also covers, and how do you go about that whole process?
Yeah, well, obviously, like, you need to consider the space that you're in. Oftentimes, too, the venue will have kind of guidelines as to what they prefer and whatnot. Maybe it's a little more R&B heavy or something. And so then I'll think of the covers that I'm going to do, and even my original songs, and lean more into the R&B side of things. Like just recently I played a singles night, at this hotel. And so it was a lot of love songs, I think in terms of, because I write a lot of music myself, in terms of the breakdown of covers to originals, it really depends on the prerequisite of the venue and what they, if they have sort of a policy on like, we need this many covers, then obviously I'll make a cover heavy set. If they don't really care, then I'll definitely infuse a bit more of my own music into the set. So you kind of like play it by ear there, and like you take the lead from the venue and how specific they get or not, and then you kind of see. I will say there's a lot of stuff on the fly that you just kind of read the room and you're like, okay, this isn't working, this went well, so maybe I'll do a song similar to that, and then you kind of just adapt with the room.
All right, that is very interesting to me as well. So do you just have all these songs memorized beforehand, or?
Well, there's like, I have like my A-list covers that I'm like, I basically know these fully without looking at anything. And then I have songs like I'm very familiar with, but I still need the lyrics and chords. But like, you see a lot of non-ticketed artists with an iPad or lead sheet or something. And so I can just pull up any song in the world and see the chords. And if I'm familiar with that tune, then I can do it.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
It's nice to have the flexibility like that, because if you're in a pinch and you've played like 2.5 hours already and you're like, I'm out of material, you're like, what's the song I could cover that I know? And then you start building your cover set even more and more and more, so it's good.
I feel like especially like reading the room is such an important skill.
Oh,
for
absolutely.
an artist and for a musician.
It's everything. And I mean, that's the thing that you need to sort of consider as a non-ticketed, in the non-ticketed spaces, is like, you're not the focal point of the night, And with that, I think that's a good thing. Like, then you can actually read crowds better. And then you'll see the songs that really work, and when people turn around and take notice. And you just clock all those things, and it's just valuable data, basically.
One last question for you. You mentioned the advice that you've been given. If you think of your younger self, what is one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
I would just say like stick with your gut more. Like, you're right to like not think that certain things. I would just say like believe in yourself a little bit more, which is funny to say because I definitely like was way too cocky and believed myself in such a big way, but it was insecurity. Right, so it's a false confidence. But I would just say like, no, your ideas are valid, they're good. Like, these people don't know any more than you do,
I think that's good advice. And I think you embody that pretty well, or you seem to be embodying that pretty well also, with just being authentic to who you are, creating music that you like to create and that you have fun with, and working with people you like. And I feel like you, what is that word? Like, you exude confidence almost. Not cockiness. Nice. But
I think
there's a fine line.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that my younger self was cocky, and now I'm confident. Yeah. I
love that, and I think also like just growing up and experiencing more.
And I'll have to say, like, that did take, my ego was absolutely crushed and destroyed. I was like, really, really struggling, and then slowly but surely, built myself up again. So I think that's why it's like kind of a healthier perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. You've been so generous for your time.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.